Jaya Yamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Kunja Vihari Jaya Yamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Vihari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jai Shri Prabhupada ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So reading from 6th canto, chapter 16, verse 59. Smritvehayam Parikleshang Smritvehayam Parikleshang Smritvehayam Parikleshang Tata Phala Viparyayam Tata Phala Viparyayam Tata Phala Viparyayam Abhayam Chapyanihayam Chapyanihayam Abhyayam Chapya Abhyayam Chapyanahiyam Abhyayam Chapninihayam Sankalpad Viramet Kavihi Sankalpad Vipramet Kavihi Sankalpad Virimet Kavihi Smritvehayam Pariklesham Tatavala Viparyayam Avayam Chapyanihayam Sankalpad Viramet Kavihi Smritvehayam Pariklesham Tatavala Viparyayam Avyayam Chapyanihayam Sankalpad Viramet Kavihi Smritvehayam Pariklesham Tatavala Viparyayam Avyayam Chapyanihayam Sankalpad Viramet Kavihi. Smritvehayam Pariklesham Tatavala Viparyayam Avyayam Chapyanihayam Sankalpad Viramet Kavihi. Abhayam Chapyanihayam Sankalpad Viramet Kavihi. Ladies, not today, okay. Smritva, remembering. Vihayam, in the field of activities with fruitive results. Pariklesham, the waste of energy and the miserable conditions. Tata, from that. Alavipriyayam, opposite of the desired result. Abhayam, fearlessness. Cha, also. Happy, indeed. Anihayam, when there is no desire for fruitive results. Sankalpat, from the material desire. Viramet should cease. Kavihi, one who is advanced in knowledge. Translation. Remembering the great trouble found in the field of activities performed for fruitive results, and remembering how one receives the reverse of the results one desires, whether from material actions or from the fruitive activities recommended in the Vedic literatures, an intelligent man should cease from the desire for fruitive actions. For by such endeavors, one cannot achieve the ultimate goal of life. On the other hand, if one acts without desires for fruitive results, in other words, if one engages in devotional activities, he can achieve the highest goal of life with freedom from miserable conditions. Considering this, one should cease from material desires. Okay, I'm going to repeat that one. You remember that? Okay, all right. Remembering the great trouble found in the field of activities performed for fruitive results, and remembering how one receives the reverse of the results one desires, whether from material actions or from the fruitive activities recommended in the Vedic literatures, an intelligent man should cease from the desire for such fruitive actions. For by such endeavors, one cannot achieve the ultimate goal of life. On the other hand, if one acts without desires for fruitive results, in other words, if one engages in devotional activities, he can achieve the highest goal of life with freedom from miserable conditions. Considering this, one should cease from material desires. There's no purport, and there's no purport to the next verse, and the next verse, and the next verse, and the next verse, and that's the end of the chapter. So I'll just read the translations of these last few verses. As a husband and wife, a man and woman plan together to attain happiness and decrease unhappiness, working jointly in many ways, but because their activities are full of desires, these activities are never a source of happiness, and they never diminish distress. On the contrary, they are a cause of great unhappiness. So I should have said text 60. Text 61. Text 61 and 62. Translation. One should understand that the activities of persons who are proud of their material experience bring only results contradictory to those such persons conceive while awake, sleeping, and deeply sleeping. One should further understand that the spirit soul, although very difficult for the materialist to perceive, is above all these conditions. And by the strength of one's discrimination, one should give up the desire for fruitive results in the present life and in the next. Thus, becoming experienced in transcendental knowledge, one should become my devotee. Text 63, translation. Persons who try to reach the ultimate goal of life must expertly observe the Supreme Absolute Person and the living entity, who are one in quality in their relationship as part and whole. This is the ultimate understanding of life. There is no better truth than this. Text 64. O King, if you accept this conclusion of mine, being unattached to material enjoyment, adhering to me with great faith, and thus becoming proficient and fully aware of knowledge and its practical application in life, you will achieve the highest perfection by attaining me. Text 65. Translation. Sri Sukadeva Goswami continued, after thus instructing Chitraketu and assuring him of perfection in this way, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the Supreme Spiritual Master, the Supreme Soul, Sankarshan, disappeared from that place as Chitraketu looked on. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports to the 6th canto, 16th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled King Chitraketu Meets the Supreme Lord. So these last few verses describe this various distresses, the distressful condition in the material world. And the answer is actually given in the purport which we had yesterday. So I'm going to just refer back to that, because that covers all these, that purport covers these last few verses. And the purport, part of the purport which holds the key to this, is this particular verse. So just give some invocation. Nama Om Vishnavara Krishna Vastaya Bhutane Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Nityanamane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nevasesha Sunyavadi Paschatati Shatarane Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Svetata Gadadha Shiva Sari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Okay. So this particular verse in the purport, and also part of the actual verse, is this Bharata Bhumiti Haila Manushya Janma Yara Janma Sakatara Kari Kara Para Upakara. Everyone born in India, especially as a human being, can achieve the supreme success through the Vedic literature and its practical application in life. When one is perfect, he can render a service for the self-realization of the entire human society. This is the best way to perform humanitarian work. So this verse, Srila Prabhupada used it many times when he had a sort of Indian audience, to encourage them, to kind of refer back to their culture, their religion, or the philosophy of the Vedas, in helping him with the mission of Krishna consciousness all over the world. But we don't often hear so much the next verse. This was Adi Leela 9:41. So the next verse, 9:42, broadens this out a bit. Avyaj janma saupyalyam dehinam iha dehishu pranya atya divya vacha shreya acharam sada. Translation is: it is the duty of every living being to perform welfare activities for the benefit of others with his life, wealth, intelligence, and words. So this refers to everyone. This first verse is directed at the Indian culture, but the second verse is for everyone. And this is further backed up in a verse earlier in the chapter. If I can find it. No, I've lost it. Basically, I can't find the verse because I took the bookmark out. But basically, that verse explains that everyone should perform this Sankirtan movement, should all over the world, for the benefit of human society. So these verses say that one should perform welfare activities for the benefit of all. But welfare activities fall under separate two categories. Most people do not understand in the material world the transcendental aspect of welfare activities. One can do welfare activity, for instance, giving food to the homeless. But that welfare activity binds one to this material world. It is welfare activity in the mode of goodness, but still it binds one, because one would have to come back in another life to receive the benefits that you give to someone in mundane food, unoffered food, boga. And the person who you give it to would have to come back to give it to you. So good and bad karma both bind one to this material world. So it is only through understanding the Vedic literature that one can understand what real welfare activity is. And by this welfare activity, one is freed from this material world. There is benefit for the giver and for the receiver. With transcendental benefits, when dealing with Krishna, one can never be the loser. One is always benefited in that way. So I want to sort of focus a little bit on our mission, what our mission is. And yeah, I'd like to give a few thoughts on that. So I've been involved with trying to encourage book distribution in the UK in various ways over the years, over the last 20 years. And yes, okay. And I've seen various different projects for trying to increase book distribution, but they would only have some temporary increase, and then it would go back to the status quo. I think I can remember 5 different initiatives to try and increase book distribution, and every time there would be some small increase, and then they would go back again to what it was before. And so I was thinking, why is this? What is the cause? And I was thinking, what else, has the same characteristics as this? What else has these characteristics where you get a small increase for a little while, something is okay, and then it goes back to what it was before? And I thought, a symptom. Symptoms have these characteristics. That if you treat a symptom in holistic medicine, or not holistic, if you treat a symptom and you don't get to the cause, then it reverts back. Like blowing on a boil. You can blow on the boil and you get some temporary relief, but because you haven't dealt with the problem, then it comes back again. So I thought, so these initiatives to try and increase book distribution, this book distribution, it must be a symptom. It must be a symptom of something. So I thought, okay, so what is the whole that it is a symptom? That is a symptom from? In other words, the whole body. When we treat the body, we look at the whole. In holistic medicine, they treat the whole body. So what is what is the body behind this symptom that we're seeing with book distribution? And I figured, well, I wonder what it is. Is it ISKCON? Is it the mission? What is the mission? Is ISKCON the mission? So I asked devotees, I said, so ISKCON, is ISKCON the mission? Or is the mission something else? Or, have you ever thought about it? And I didn't really get anywhere. So I started to think about it and did some reading, talked to devotees over a period of a few years. And it appears that ISKCON is not the mission. But we'll get into that in a minute. In the West, there's a confusion because words are used. The word church, for instance, is used interchangeably. Sometimes church means the congregation. Sometimes it means the physical building. Sometimes it means the teachings. And I think in the West, we've brought this confusion into the understanding. And many devotees, they think, well, ISKCON is the mission. But the mission was there before ISKCON. So this is very interesting because Prabhupada was preaching in New York before ISKCON existed. And there's one account in a book by Achyutananda Swami called Blazing Sadhus, where he explains he was there in the storefront at 26th Avenue when Brahmananda came back from registering ISKCON. He came back in the evening. And he said, Prabhupada, I've registered the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And Prabhupada, he said, yes, this International Society for Krishna Consciousness can be a great tool to help us spread the chanting of Hare Krishna, he said. But if it doesn't fulfill its mission, its purpose, he said, if it doesn't fulfill its purpose, we can dissolve it. So you should be very careful. That's what he said. So we can understand that the mission, is very is a sacred thing. It's coming from somewhere else. And where is it coming from? It's coming from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the mission to reclaim the fallen souls. So I started to think, okay, so the mission, how can we define, in one sort of bullet point, what is this mission? We've got the 7 purposes. We've got the 6 Shastakam prayers, which is the whole mission in seed form. We've got everything Srila Prabhupada said about preaching and what our mission is. We've got everything that every other devotee has said. How can we make a statement, like a mission statement, or how can we make the most shortest possible statement which includes all of that? And I came up with bring others to Krishna. 4 words. Bring others to Krishna. That includes everything. And it means bring others to Krishna all the way home, back to Godhead. So you could say that this is a mission statement for ISKCON. One could say that. I can't say that on behalf of the GBC body, but I can say that on behalf of what my own research has come up with. You could say another one is to give Krishna to others. That's also 4 words. But to bring others to Krishna includes that. Because in order to bring others to Krishna all the way back home, back to Godhead, you have to give them Krishna. Anyway, so that's already included. So bring others to Krishna. One could say that that's our mission. So then I thought, if you make a statement like that, it implies someone has to do it. Otherwise it's pointless. You make some statement, bring others to Krishna. Who, what, how? So I thought, okay, well that's the devotee. The devotee is the person who brings others to Krishna. So then I began to think, well, what would be a mission statement for the devotee? And I came up with to become purified, to become perfect by bringing others to Krishna. So that is the goal of the devotee, that we become purified by bringing others to Krishna. And that ties in with the Yugadam of Chaito Darpana Marjanam. You ask devotees, well, what's the Yugadam? And they say, chanting Hare Krishna. No, it's only half the story. Srila Prabhupada defines the Yugadam as congregational chanting of the holy name. And he defines that, but he gives the purport to congregational chanting is going out for the benefit of others. So all this morning program, all this studying books, all this japa is all to bring us to this point of giving it to others, to reinforce our own spiritual strength, to be able to go out and give Krishna to others, bring others to Krishna. So this is the goal of the devotee, to become perfect or to become purified by giving Krishna to others. So that is a statement which summarizes the first verse of the 6 Shastakam prayers. So that it's kind of interesting. So then if you say, okay, how does this work? How can we analyze this? What does it look like? And we see that all the great souls in our parampara, they're 100% surrendered, they're 100% committed to bringing others to Krishna. So it's very interesting that in the spiritual world also, there's a kind of gopi called a Manjari gopi. A lot of people, they want this gopi bhava, Have you heard this? People wanting to get in the mood of the gopis. They want to read esoteric stories about Radha and Krishna, and they're going to become very advanced in sex life by doing that, probably themselves. Because it's not recommended that we look into the intimate affairs of Radha and Krishna, because we're not ready. We're not on that platform. But we can see in the spiritual world that the most intimate, or one of the most surrendered, the advanced devotees are the Manjari gopis. So they are completely selfless. They have no desire to personally be with Krishna. The Manjari gopis are young girls, and they selflessly make arrangements to bring the other gopis to Krishna. That is their service, to selflessly bring the other gopis to Krishna. That's their eternal position. So it's very interesting. If we look in our parampara, we will see that many of the acharyas, their spiritual identity is that they were Manjaris. Rupa Goswami was Rupa Manjari, Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, so many of them, they are Manjaris. And they gave themselves 100% selflessly to bringing others to Krishna. So we can understand that selfless mood of the Manjaris to bring the other gopis to Krishna is extended into this world as a Sankirtan movement. So it's pretty amazing if you think like that we can directly serve the Manjaris through the parampara. And if you want Gopi Bhava, get a book bag. Go on Harinam. This is the mood of our parampara. It is the mood of the Manjaris to become selfless, by bringing others to Krishna. That we develop this mood like that. So we may not be selfless ourselves, but if we follow the selfless, then we become selfless. If we see some devotees who are selflessly trying to bring others to Krishna, then if we serve them, then it's the same. We're connected like that. So it's pretty amazing, that we're able to serve the Manjaris through the parampara like that. The mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is so great. A drunken person who may be eating meat, taking drugs, he may be intoxicated, and he tags on the end of the Harinam, and he's putting his arms in the air, and he's dancing a little, Hare Krishna. So he's directly serving the Manjaris. What mercy that someone like that can, directly serve the Manjari gopis. So there's the extreme mercy that we have in Kali Yuga. So we have the mission to bring others to Krishna. The mission statement of the devotee. How is it done? Who does it? So you have the mission, the missionary, to become selfless by bringing others to Krishna. But then what is the method? So we've got the mission, we've got the missionary. What's the method? Okay. Yes. There's four items actually. There's books, prasadam, harinam. So we could call those the three great gifts. Books, prasadam, harinam. But then you need a spiritual care program. That when you give the books and the prasadam and the harinam, then you need a method. You need a care program to bring those people all the way back home, back to Godhead. So you need the three great gifts and a spiritual care program. So you have the mission, bring others to Krishna. You have the missionary, to become selfless by bringing others to Krishna. And you have the method, the three great gifts and a spiritual care program. So it's interesting like that. So one of those gifts is the Brihat Mridanga. So I mentioned yesterday a little bit can we quantify it? And we can. The Brihat Radanga is so potent. These books can last for over 500 years, as proved by copies of the Bible, which are still in existence after 500 years. So we have the mission, the missionary, the method. So then you need an infrastructure for the method, the part of the method. You need an infrastructure to support the 3 great gifts and the spiritual care program. So what is that infrastructure? That is ISKCON. It's the temples, the Nam hats. They're there to provide a place where we can provide spiritual care, spiritual training, where we can go out and give the 3 great gifts from. So ISKCON is the supporting infrastructure for the mission. This is what it looks like to me. The mission is eternal. It's coming from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And the infrastructure carries the mission in the material world, just like the material body carries the soul in the material world. So ISKCON is carrying the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The mission was in the body of the Gaudiya mat. As a friend of mine pointed out, the body got sick. So Prabhupada took the mission and he put it in the body of ISKCON. So it's interesting. It's just a different angle of looking at what we're doing, to try and strip it right down to the basics, so we have a very clear focus of what we're meant to be doing. What is the goal of life? So then one can draw an analogy from that the mission is like the soul and ISKCON is like the body, because the body carries the soul in the material world. Of course, it's not a material body. ISKCON's a spiritual body, like the spiritual body of the spiritual master. But nonetheless, it is a body and is carrying the mission. So that analogy has some serious implications. One implication is one could be on the ISKCON conception of life, like the bodily conception of life. When one only sees the mission, one only sees the infrastructure and one forgets about the mission. Do you see? One could be, it could be like that. A devotee, sometimes devotees think, I'll go and open a big temple and make loads of devotees. But temples don't make devotees. Devotees make devotees. You see? So one could have the wrong understanding. That ISKCON is the supporting infrastructure. It is not the mission itself. There are other implications. I identified a few implications. In the Bhagavad Gita, it said the devotee is fearless. So if ISKCON is off the ISKCON conception of life, then it would have no fear of other groups like Ritviks or other groups. If you become fearless, the devotee is fearless. Another one: if the soul leaves the body dies. If the mission is not being carried out by ISKCON, ISKCON will die. It's simple. So these implications are there. Another implication is said in the scriptures: if one is completely impoverished, he cannot even think about spiritual life. He's too busy struggling to survive. Do we know any temples like that? They're struggling. Maybe they've gone through some tough time. Many devotees are left, and they're struggling just to pay the gas bill, and so they can't even think about buying books and distributing books. And so these implications are there from that analogy. It was very interesting. So Prabhupada has some recommendation on that. He said 50% of your income goes to temple construction and 50% goes to the BBT for book distribution or preaching. So that was his recommendation. So we can have a look at that. Let's have a look at it. So what is that implying? It's implying that as your preaching grows, your infrastructure to support it also grows in equal amounts. That's the implication of what he's saying. You know, the more you preach, the more people come, the bigger the infrastructure you're going to need to support that preaching. But it could get top heavy if you're not careful. It could be that your infrastructure, due to different circumstances, is strangling the preaching that you're having to maintain. So anyway, we can test that analogy. We can test that recommendation of Prabhupada's. We could imagine a project which is almost 100% mission, but there's no infrastructure to support it. So would you make as many devotees? You may be distributing lots of books, giving out lots of prasadam, doing lots of harinams. Well, you may not be giving out many books because you haven't got the infrastructure for it. But so lots of people would get Krishna, but there would be no, you've got no infrastructure for the care program, for the training, to bring people back home, back to Godhead. So would you make as many devotees if it was 100% mission or nearly 100% mission with hardly any supporting infrastructure? The answer is no. You wouldn't. You'd make some, but you wouldn't make as many. So let's take the analogy or Prabhupada's recommendation. Let's take it the other way. Let's look at a project which is 100% nearly its infrastructure, and there's hardly any preaching going on, because all the energy is going into building huge buildings and, you know, lavish temple. Because temple worship was for Dwapara Yuga. Kali Yuga is the holy name. But anyway, would you make as many devotees? Because the books are not going out so much. You've got this wonderful project, but, you know, temples don't make devotees. Devotees make devotees. So the answer is no. You'd make some, but you wouldn't make as many. So Prabhupada's recommendation was this 50-50. Or basically just try and balance it so that the energy, the manpower and Lakshmi you're putting into preaching is similar to the manpower and Lakshmi that you're putting into the supporting infrastructure to keep it going. And it would seem that is the best formula is the one that Prabhupada gave. So nearly time for prasadam. I could go on and on and on, but is there any questions, comments? Okay, got 5 more minutes just before you jab up through.
Thank you for raising so many points that I hadn't considered before. I was just thinking one of the most successful infrastructures in recent years was in Dubai. And then, well, not just Dubai, but in the Emirates in general, like in countries where temples were impossible because of the lack of tolerance of other religions, you could say, to some degree. And yet at the same time, it was like one of the most successful places for devotees, supporting devotees in terms of long-term care. And actually, and I think in about 20 years, there were 7,000 initiated devotees from that yatra. So, like when Srila Prabhupada said 50% for temple construction, 50% for BBT, but it would seem that in a situation like Dubai where temple construction wasn't possible, then the devotees perhaps took the principle of Prabhupada's instruction, but it just due to difficult circumstances they were forced.
Yes. Yeah, it's a general instruction, and there's always exceptions to the rule, the specifics. Like, for instance, he ordered temples to be built in Bombay, Vrindavan, and Mayapur. So they're kind of excluded from that. But the general kind of thing for trying to maintain and balance the preaching between the infrastructure, throughout the world in general, this is what he was giving. But there's always room. Prabhupada would always change and adjust things for individual, circumstances. Kamlesh Prabhu.
If I can just make a point on Java Prabhu's point about the Middle East. We look at temples physically as buildings with deities, etc., and elaborate worship. But examine what is a temple. When we look at Srila Prabhupada's first centers that he had, let's say New York, a storefront, that was termed as a temple, right? A temple is a gathering of devotees, the focus of the devotees in one particular place. And then from there, as spokes going out elsewhere. And this is what's happened in the Middle East. In that they have gatherings, they have centers where they meet, etc. And that technically is a temple, right? That is the infrastructure. By temple, Srila Prabhupada meant the infrastructure to facilitate and to be the focus of preaching going forward. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, I did mention in the beginning that I saw the infrastructure as the temples, the Nam hats, the congregations. So it's that support. Quite often in the past, we've had these kind of gung-ho projects where it's just books, Harinam, 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 but there's no facility for the training, to bring people all the way in, all the way home back to Godhead. And it doesn't, I was told before I joined in 1982, if you don't join the temple, you're not a devotee, So if anybody preached that now, you'd think they were mad, And if you examine, Prabhupada said, it doesn't matter where you find yourself in life, whether you're married, whether you're single, whether you're in prison, whatever circumstance you find yourself in, you add Krishna to it. That's all. Because everything else comes from that. If one sincerely chants, one sincerely reads these books, one will come to this conclusion that one should perform the Yuga Dharma. And if you can't directly perform the Yuga Dharma, that's no problem. You can support those who are, and that's as good as. And there's one verse in the Bhagavatam where Prabhupada said, even if someone sympathizes with the aims of this great movement, he'll get the same benefit of those who are in it. So this is the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It's extreme mercy. You have a question, Prabhu? What's your name, Prabhu?
Panchatattva Das.
Panchatattva Das.
Thank you very much, Prabhu. I'm just wondering, we see how the movement is clearly goes through different phases. Like when Prabhupada's time, like 99% of devotees lived in temples, even grihastas, and they also lived in temples quite often. And whereas now it's almost the opposite. The vast majority of devotees live outside. So it seems like oftentimes some of the infrastructure can get sort of like frozen.
Well, bodies can get sick, can't they?
Yeah.
A body can get sick, or a body can, So Prabhupada said, to Brahmananda and Achyutananda Swami at the time, this ISKCON, we must be very careful. So just as we have to look after our own body, we have to see to look after the body of ISKCON as well. And these changes are there. My personal feeling, maybe that's a speculative thing to say from where I'm sitting on this big seat here. My own take on that is that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Prabhupada, they had to kickstart this movement. And Prabhupada had to just basically heavy everybody out as much as possible to just kickstart the movement. He had to make sannyasis in their 20s. He didn't have anybody else. But he had to establish a sannyas ashram. He must have known that these young guys, a lot of them may not make it, but some would. He had to do whatever he could. He knew he'd only got a few years. He knew he could leave at any moment. So he had to do, in an emergency, he had to do whatever he could to kickstart this movement. And in 3 years, he opened 108 temples. I mean, who can open 108 temples in 3 years? I went to Liverpool in 1989 with my wife. We had a madanga and cartels. We didn't have anything. And we stayed 10 years. We opened a temple. I thought after 18 months, I'd have this temple up and running, and I'd go to Leeds and I'd do another one. And maybe 5 years I'd open 2, 3 temples. But, Krishna had to teach me who I really am, and I ended up in one place for 10 years. So it's not that easy. Prabhupada had the spiritual potency, that purity. He was able to do things which, I can't do. There's many sannyasis and gurus who've left this movement, but I can safely say, they've done far more preaching than I can ever do. And my own spiritual master, he left, but anyway, that's his problem. That's between him and Krishna. It's not going to affect my spiritual life, So anyway, but he opened many temples. He did so much preaching, made so many devotees. He was in that unfortunate situation where he had to be a sannyasi in his 20s, or late 20s, early. He was 36 when he initiated me. As a young man, you know what I mean? Maya's going to have a field day, with this movement. But we just have to do our best, and try and serve the order of the spiritual master. And that order of the spiritual master is coming down the parampara. And that order is to preach. It's right here from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, to preach Krishna consciousness all over the world. That is the order of the spiritual master. And it's a sacred order. It's coming directly from Krishna. It's a sacred order. And we're so fortunate to get that order. And so we should try and cultivate the right mood that we've received the order of the Lord. And it's a great benediction to have received that order of the Lord. And we should follow that order. Whatever instruction we get, we should follow it until we get another instruction. And if we don't get another instruction, then we follow that instruction. We follow it right through our life, right up to our very last breath. We execute the order of the Lord. And if that's not enough, then we carry on into our next life executing the order of the Lord. But we should never give it up, and we should never disobey it. It's a sacred order that we've been given. There's so many millions of people out there. They haven't had that fortune that we have. And we should not take it lightly. We should not disregard that. It's difficult sometimes. Spiritual life's not easy. There was one conversation Prabhupada was having with one of his godbrothers, and he said, I tricked all my disciples. I told them spiritual life was easy. So, he had to get this movement going, And he said the most difficult thing in the material world is to run a spiritual movement. So I take my hat off to our temple presidents. Our temple presidents, Prabhupada put more energy, if you like, or more weight on the temple presidents, because the temple presidents are taking the responsibility to look after the deities, to look after the devotees, to distribute books, to distribute prasadam, to organize all of that. And it's a huge responsibility to put your neck on the line like that. I did it for 10 years, and it's not easy. I can tell you, it's not easy. So, I take my hat off to any temple president, because you have to deal with so many things. And, sometimes you make the wrong decision. Sometimes I made the wrong decision about things. and it has implications. It has implications for people's, for devotees, and one has to admit, you have to admit, I made a mistake, apologize, you know. But it's such a difficult service. It's the most difficult service. But I think we've gone over time, and we don't want to disrespect Prasadam. Jai Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Harinam Sankirtan ki jai.
Yeah.